For 3 horrifying years in 18th century France, a mysterious creature stalked the countryside, leaving over 100 people dead. Hundreds hunted it, priests prayed over its victims, and its legend grew. But what if modern DNA technology could finally uncover what this beast really was? A wolf, a monster, or something far darker? If this already feels too strange to be real, good. That's exactly the kind of real-life horror stories we tell here. So consider subscribing and leaving a like if mysteries like these is your kind of thing. Now, let me take you back to a forgotten hillside village in France, and a boy history tried to overlook. In 1764, 12-year-old Jacques Portefeuille lived a life that was as harsh as it was predictable. His family, like most others in the remote French village of La Bessire-Sainte-Marie, barely scraped by. Their small stone cottage, shared with several farm animals, was more necessity than comfort. Winters were long, work was grueling, and food shortages were a constant companion to the villagers. Jacques, the eldest of 7 children, was expected to help his parents tend the fields, guard the cattle, and protect his younger siblings from the dangers of the wild countryside. But for all his responsibilities, Jacques had developed a reputation, one that clung to him like an unwelcome shadow. He was known throughout the village as a coward. It wasn't a reputation anyone would envy. The boys his age mocked him openly, calling him Le Poulet Mouillé, the wet chicken, a cruel nickname that started after he ran from a fight he couldn't win. The adults weren't much kinder either. They didn't intervene or offer comfort. They believed that survival in a place like Gevaudan demanded a certain hardness even in children. To them, Jacques' supposed lack of bravery was just evidence that he wasn't up to the task. He felt their judgment in the sideways glances, the quiet whispers, and on the rare occasions when a neighbor would mention him out loud, there was always a bitter note of pity, as if they considered him some foregone conclusion. Jacques' siblings joined in as well, teasing him at home until the weight of it all seemed inescapable. He held back his tears most of the time, biting his lip until it hurt, because the only thing worse than being insulted was letting everyone see how much it got to him. Jacques knew the wilds around their village could be unkind. Wolves roamed just beyond the tree line, beyond the windswept pastures where he herded the cattle. But something else had started to happen that summer. Something far more sinister, though nobody wanted to admit it outright at first. People in neighboring parishes spoke in halting tones about a creature lurking on the hillsides, attacking shepherds and lone travelers. It wasn't a wolf, the survivors claimed. It was bigger, faster, more cunning than anything they'd seen before. It killed for sport, tearing at its victims' throats and leaving their mutilated bodies behind as a twisted display of its power. Whispers of La Bête started trickling through the village. Like an invisible smoke, the fear settled in over Gevaudan, and the villagers who had once teased Jacques for being scared now treaded cautiously themselves. It was late in the afternoon on a damp September day when Jacques, along with a few other children, was sent out to guard a herd of cattle in a nearby field. Thunderclouds loomed low, casting the world in a pale gray light. The air carried a chill, and the forest bordering the pasture was unnervingly silent, except for the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. Jacques adjusted his grip on the wooden staff his father had carved for him, trying to focus on the task at hand. The cattle plodded lazily over the grass, oblivious to their nervous guardians. Jacques felt the same unease he always did when out in the open, a low hum of dread that never quite left him. He told himself this was just another ordinary day, until it wasn't. The attack started so suddenly that Jacques didn't even see the beast at first. A blur of motion exploded from the forest, and one of the calves let out a sharp, panicked bellow as it was dragged to the ground. For a second, Jacques just froze, staring, his mind refusing to make sense of what he was seeing. The creature was massive, its fur bristling in dark streaks of red and black. Its eyes gleamed with a strange, almost intelligent light as it tore into the calf, growling low and guttural. Then it paused, lifting its blood-stained muzzle to scan the field. Instinctively, Jacques and the other children screamed, some stumbling back, others clutching at the sticks they carried but clearly unsure of what to do. The beast moved toward them, slow and deliberate, like it was assessing its next meal. The raw terror in its presence paralyzed them. Jacques felt the edges of a scream clawing its way up his throat, but bit it back. He forced himself to take a step forward, then another. His heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst, but something in him snapped. Whether it was fear, anger, or even shame, he didn't know. He raised his voice and yelled as loudly as he could, waving his staff in the air and hurling rocks in the direction of the beast. The other children, spurred on by his unexpected boldness, followed suit, creating as much noise and chaos as they could. The beast's growl deepened as it lunged toward them but stopped short, startled by their sudden defiance. It was over in seconds. The creature turned and bounded back into the forest, leaving only the torn remains of the calf as evidence it had been there at all. Jacques stood motionless, trembling from head to toe, clutching his stick as though it were the only thing keeping him upright. For the first time in his life, he hadn't run. But as the children hurried back to their families, shouting about their brush with the beast, Jacques knew this moment wouldn't be the end of it. If anything, it was only the beginning. For 3 long years, from 1764 to 1767, the remote province of Gevaudan became the stage for a nightmare that defied explanation. It began quietly enough. A local girl, just 14 years old, went missing while tending cattle one summer day. When her body was found, the sheer brutality of the attack stunned the villagers. This wasn't the work of a wolf, or at least not any wolf they'd ever seen. Over time, more victims followed. Men, women, and children, often isolated in the fields or along forested paths, would be discovered torn apart, their throats savagely attacked and bodies partially consumed. The attacks were so frequent and so devastating that soon, Gevaudan's communities could barely function. People stopped going to the fields alone. Fairs and festivals were canceled, and children were told not to venture far from home. The beast, as it came to be called, ruled their lives. What made the predator even more terrifying was how deliberate it seemed to be in targeting humans. Wolves were always a danger in rural France, but they didn't hunt people down like this. Typical wolf hunts focused on livestock, quick kills meant for survival. It was rare for wolves to attack humans, and even when they did, their patterns were chaotic. The beast, however, seemed to be something else entirely. Witnesses often described how it would emerge as if it were watching, waiting for someone vulnerable to step into view. Children were frequent victims, likely because they were the ones tasked with tending the sheep and cattle. But the creature didn't seem to have any specific prey. It attacked indiscriminately. Farmers, travelers, mothers tending their gardens were all at risk. The bodies were left mutilated, almost as though the creature was making a point. Contemporary accounts painted its appearance as something caught between the world of fact and imagination. To most, it was wolf-like, but only vaguely so. Eyewitness descriptions gave it an otherworldly edge. They spoke about its massive size, larger than any dog or wolf they had ever seen, with fur streaked in black and red, and an elongated snout lined with teeth too prominent, too jagged to seem real. Some even swore that its tail was unnaturally long, almost whip-like, or that its movements seemed unnatural, as though it knew when and where to strike, to sow the most terror. Priests who blessed the graves of its many victims were said to claim it must be a creature of God's wrath, sent to punish the province for its sins. Whether it was a wolf, a lion, or some abomination born of nightmares depended on who you asked, but no one doubted its existence. Efforts to stop the creature began almost immediately, but they yielded little besides more death. Local hunters and even small militia groups patrolled the woods, setting traps, organizing large-scale drives, and waiting for opportunities to corner it. On more than one occasion, their hunts ended with a wolf being killed, and its body triumphantly brought back to the village, only for the attacks to continue days or even hours later. Each failure added to the villagers' sense of dread. This was no ordinary animal, they began to believe, but something beyond their understanding, perhaps a spirit, a demon, or worse, a creature with intelligence greater than theirs. What's particularly striking, even now, is that the beast not only evaded capture, but also displayed remarkable boldness. Most large predators stick to areas where they feel protected, hunting at the edges of human activity. But not this one. It appeared to enter the very heart of community life in Gevaudan, striking fear not just into those it targeted, but into entire villages. One particularly gruesome case involved a boy, barely 8 years old, dragged from his own front garden in full view of his horrified family. These stories, repeated in hushed whispers, only deepened the beast's reputation as a thing of malevolence rather than nature. Modern studies on predator behavior have highlighted just how unusual the beast's hunting patterns were. This has led some experts today to question whether the beast might have been more brain than brawn, a predator capable of using its surroundings, perhaps even learning how its prey behaved. The faint echoes of intelligence in its actions, choosing isolated targets, evading hunters, add to the lingering mystery. By the middle of its reign, the people of Gevaudan weren't just frightened, they were desperate. Entire towns lived under curfew, with their inhabitants retreating indoors by twilight. Masses were held daily, and some villagers put their faith in holy relics to repel the creature. Hunters roaming the woods carried crosses and prayed under their breath with every step forward. As time dragged on, a chilling new belief spread like wildfire. This was no animal, they insisted, but something darker entirely. Some swore it was a werewolf, punished to roam the land in its monstrous form. Others thought it was sent by the devil himself. In any case, it was no longer a question of whether it could be killed. With each passing month, they began to doubt whether it could die at all. In 2025, nearly 3 centuries after the attacks began, the Beast of Gévaudan is still provoking questions. But unlike the villagers of the 1760s, who relied on prayer and pitchforks, modern scientists are equipped with tools those people would have called magic. DNA analysis, forensic modeling, and AI pattern mapping. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from a preserved specimen once believed to be the beast. Genetic testing revealed it wasn't a pure wolf, but a wolf-dog hybrid, showing markers from both wild and domestic canines. Crossbreeding like this can result in larger, more aggressive predators, possibly explaining its unnatural boldness and behavior. Another theory surfaced when soil samples from several attack sites revealed trace biological markers consistent with large felines, including lions. At first, the idea seemed ridiculous, but in 18th century France, exotic animals were occasionally kept by nobility. Lions, leopards, even cheetahs were traded privately and housed in estate collections. If one ever escaped, it could have easily gone undetected in the remote terrain of Gevaudan. Could the beast have been one such predator, displaced and enraged? Meanwhile, forensic researchers revisited detailed injury reports recorded at the time. Some of the wounds, throats torn open, limbs shredded, didn't align neatly with known wolf attacks. In fact, the bite patterns matched large dogs, lions, and possibly more than one attacker. This led to a new theory. The beast may not have been a lone creature at all, but a pack, led or controlled by something even more intelligent. Then came a chilling twist. When researchers fed historical attack data into an AI model, the results upended everything. The beast's movements weren't random. They followed strategic corridors, fields dividing villages, key trade routes, boundary lines between parishes. It was almost as if the predator understood how humans moved. Or worse, someone else did. This reignited speculation that human involvement wasn't just a possibility. It might have been the central force all along. Could the beast have been trained, used, directed by a handler with twisted motives? Maybe it wasn't just a monster, but a weapon. Science has cleared some fog, but not all. The wolf-dog hybrid's DNA revealed anomalous genetic markers, sequences that don't match any known breed or subspecies alive today. Some researchers chalk this up to degradation over centuries. Others believe it might point to an extinct or undocumented predator, lost to time but still lurking in legend. What people often mistake for legend may sometimes come down to unexpected circumstances. A predator where it didn't belong, in an environment ill-prepared for it. And yet, each discovery only deepens the mystery. The more we learn, the more blurred the lines between biology and folklore become. Have we finally found the beast? Or is its story more complex than even today's technology can explain? Cryptozoology is one of those fields that lives right on the edge of possibility. It's the study of creatures that science hasn't officially recognized yet, cryptids as they're called. Think Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, or the Mothman. While some cases can seem outlandish, cryptozoologists approach them as mysteries grounded in patterns that deserve investigation, and few creatures have captivated them more than the Beast of Gévaudan. The sheer brutality of the attacks, combined with eyewitness descriptions of something that didn't quite fit into nature's usual blueprint, makes the beast a prime candidate for cryptid classification. Was it a relic of ancient species, a mutation, or, as the legends of its era suggest, something not entirely animal at all? In 2025, cryptozoologists are revisiting the beast story with fresh theories. A persistent idea is that this creature might fit into the loose category of werewolves. Not the Hollywood kind that transform with a full moon, but the historic concept deeply rooted in European folklore. For centuries, tales of shapeshifters prowling the forest terrified rural communities. A werewolf wasn't always a monster by choice. Some legends described it as a curse or punishment. While these stories sound like pure fiction, they emerged from real fears. Fear of wolves, fear of the untamed wilderness, and perhaps fear of neighbors who were just a little too strange. The 18th century villagers' descriptions of the beast, a wolf-like animal with unnatural size, intelligence, and aggression, align eerily well with the werewolf mythos. To the people of Gevaudan, who were steeped in superstition, it wasn't far-fetched to see this as a cursed creature sent to punish them for their sins. But here's where things get tricky. The line between myth and history in cases like this one often blurs. The way people in 1760s France understood the beast wasn't shaped by cold, hard facts, but by the cultural pulse of their time. Many villagers believed fervently in demons, witches, and divine retribution, and they filtered the beast's behaviors through that lens. Even its physical description, a giant wolf with fur streaked in blood-red markings, seems to carry more symbolic weight than biological accuracy. It's not hard to imagine how fear whipped their imagination into overdrive, transforming an already terrifying creature into something that belonged in a nightmare. These stories spread quickly across France. The beast wasn't just a local terror, it became a national obsession, inspiring pamphlets, songs, and illustrations that only magnified its monstrous reputation. This blending of fear and storytelling is what keeps the beast's legend alive. Cryptozoologists argue that the cultural component is often dismissed too quickly when investigating creatures like this. Whether or not the beast was a wolf, a lion, or something else entirely, its story was undeniably shaped by human imagination. The villagers may have exaggerated details, but those embellishments were rooted in what they genuinely felt: helplessness, foreboding, and a very real need for explanations. After all, it's easier to unite against a single demonized monster than to face the chaos of nature's indifference. And the Beast of Gévaudan wasn't alone in becoming a cultural monster. History offers us several examples of creatures whose reputations pushed them past the boundaries of reason. For instance, the chupacabra, a supposed blood-drinking predator reported in Latin America, shares a fascinating parallel with the beast. Like its French counterpart, early sightings of the chupacabra were specific and terrifying. Small livestock were found drained of blood, and witnesses described a bald reptilian animal with glowing red eyes. As the stories took hold, descriptions became more elaborate, feeding off local fears and cultural beliefs. Yet modern investigations have suggested that these sightings were likely misidentified coyotes or feral dogs suffering from mange. The truth, in cases like these, becomes harder to isolate the more folklore twists it into shape. In fact, this is exactly where cryptozoology finds itself under the spotlight. Critics of the field argue that it relies too heavily on anecdotal accounts and sensationalized stories, prioritizing intrigue over evidence. And it's true, many cryptozoological claims have fallen apart under scrutiny, with cases turning out to be hoaxes, natural phenomena, or even psychological projections of collective fear. Yet proponents argue that doesn't mean every unresolved case should be dismissed outright. The Beast of Gévaudan, they say, remains one of the best examples of why cryptozoology has merit. The unique circumstances of its hunting patterns, the conflicting descriptions, and the lack of clear historical context make it more than just folklore. It's a puzzle that science alone hasn't fully solved, and cryptozoology bridges the gap where history and biology meet the unknown. What keeps this mystery so tantalizing is that echoes of the beast's legend still linger in modern predator cases. Cryptozoologists point to a chilling incident from rural India in 2018, where a series of attacks on children and farm workers bore an unsettling resemblance to the events in Gevaudan. The reported killer? An unusual, unidentified animal that locals initially described as a large cat but later came to fear was something more. Victims were mauled in isolated fields, often with wounds that mirrored the throat injuries described in 18th century France. Wildlife officials eventually captured what they believed to be the rogue predator, but like the beast, the evidence left questions. Why did it target humans so aggressively? Was it starvation, territorial behavior, or something that still defies explanation? It's cases like this one that leave us wondering, is the story of the Beast of Gévaudan simply an ancient mystery, or is it part of a larger, ongoing pattern in how humans and predators collide? Whether you see cryptozoology as science, speculation, or somewhere in between, it's impossible to ignore the pull of these mysteries and how they remind us of what still lies hidden just beyond the edges of understanding. The story of the Beast of Gévaudan didn't end when the attacks stopped in 1767. In many ways, that's where its legacy began. Over the centuries, the beast transformed from a real, flesh-and-blood terror into a symbol of mystery and fear that reached far beyond the forests of Gevaudan. It became immortalized in folklore, literature, and eventually pop culture. The villagers who once lived in constant fear of its attacks probably couldn't have imagined their tragedy would one day inspire novels, films, and even video games. Yet the tale of the beast captivated France in the 18th century, and its grip has only grown stronger with time. But what about the people who lived through it? The fear that gripped Gevaudan for those 3 years wasn't just a fleeting moment in history. It left scars. Entire communities were isolated, trade routes dried up, and religious fervor surged as people sought divine protection. The attacks disrupted everything. Farmers abandoned their lands, families relocated to safer areas when they could, and those who stayed lived under a shadow of constant dread. Fairs, festivals, and communal gatherings, lifelines of rural life, disappeared. This wasn't just anxiety about a wild animal, it was existential. The terror magnified because the beast wasn't just killing, it was defying understanding. And when humans can't explain something, their imaginations run wild. For the descendants of those who endured the beast's reign, its memory loomed large for generations. Tales of close calls and violent deaths were passed down like heirlooms. But one story stood out from all the others. The story of Jacques Portefeuille, the boy who, in one critical moment, had done what many grown men couldn't. Jacques had faced the beast and survived. More than that, he had fought back, and against all odds, his bravery changed his fate forever. At the time of the attacks, Jacques was a nobody. He was the boy mocked by his peers, humiliated for his fear, and dismissed as a weakling by the adults around him. Yet when the beast appeared in that quiet field, threatening not just him but the other children as well, he didn't run. Instead, Jacques stood his ground. His decision to fight, not out of recklessness, but out of sheer desperation to protect others, earned him something he'd never had before: respect. Word of his actions spread like wildfire. Soon, Jacques wasn't just another frightened villager. He was a hero. His courage didn't just resonate within the bounds of Gevaudan. It traveled across France and even reached as far as Boston, Massachusetts. Jacques' ability to summon bravery in the face of overwhelming fear captured the public's imagination. When reports of his deeds reached King Louis XV, the monarch himself took notice. Louis was so moved by Jacques' actions that he summoned the young boy to court. and in a gesture that would alter Jacques' life forever, offered to pay for his education. For a boy who had spent his days trudging through muddy fields and battling the stigma of cowardice, it was an extraordinary turn of events. The king's offer wasn't just a reward, it was an escape. Jacques left his small village in Gevaudan to attend a prestigious school in northern France. There he immersed himself in books and ideas far removed from the life of farming and survival he had once known. Where others saw tragedy in the beast's reign, Jacques found something transformational. Confronting his greatest fears didn't just save his life, it reshaped his identity and opened doors he never imagined existed. He went from an outcast to someone whose legacy continues to echo today. At the same time, the beast itself became a kind of character in the public imagination. What had been a horror story to the people of Gevaudan became folklore for everyone else. Newspapers at the time sensationalized the account, spreading it far beyond France. Songs were written, sketches of the beast filled local broadsheets, and the story gained a life of its own. Over time, the physical reality of the creature blurred with supernatural speculation. By the 19th century, it had become a symbol of the unknown, part wolf, part demon, part puzzle that no one could completely solve. And even now, the myth continues to evolve. The research conducted in 2025 has added an entirely new chapter to this centuries-old story. While the DNA evidence and forensic analysis have narrowed down possibilities about the beast's true identity, they've also challenged some of the long-held assumptions. The idea that it was a single rogue wolf seems less likely with every discovery, and the possibility of human involvement has gained new traction. At the heart of it all, though, is what the beast reveals about people. Not just the villagers of Gevaudan, but humanity as a whole. The constant retelling of the beast story across cultures and centuries underscores one enduring truth. Humans cannot resist the pull of the unknown. We're drawn to things we can't explain, and when fear fills the void left by uncertainty, it transforms into legend. The Beast of Gévaudan isn't just a story about a predator. It's a reflection of how deeply fear can shape a community, a culture, and even history itself. Later in life, Jacques Portefeuille reflected on his brush with the beast. By then, he had moved far from the rugged hills of Gevaudan and built a life that must have felt a world away from those terrifying years. Yet the memory of that fateful encounter, the moment he chose to fight for the children in the field, never left him. It wasn't just a memory of fear, though. For Jacques, it marked the day he learned what kind of person he could be. The day when, for the first time, he stood taller than his fears. And if nothing else, perhaps that's the real legacy of the beast. A reminder that sometimes, the courage to face the unknown is what shapes us most. Modern science has peeled back centuries of fear and folklore to reveal a new understanding of the Beast of Gévaudan. DNA analysis and forensic techniques have shifted the narrative from superstition toward biology, narrowing the possibilities of its identity, while raising new questions entirely. Was it a hybrid predator, an exotic escapee, or something we still can't fully explain? The answers so far remind us that mysteries don't fade, they evolve. If these tools can reshape this centuries-old story, what else from history might we finally uncover? Sometimes, it's the intersection of science, history, and imagination that reveals our most fascinating truths. And if stories like this one make you wonder what else might still be hiding in the margins of history, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe for more real-life horrors that were almost lost to time. And if you made it this far, consider leaving a like, not for the story, but for the people who lived it.